Look at that. Now I have a pre-roll. So I don't
You
have
have
to
a
say
pre-roll and a title card.
a title. I know. So now we know when we're on, and I don't have to worry about sitting here going, hello, hello. Yeah, we're on. This time we're on.
Good. Okay, this time we are on.
And so I'm looking here. Everyone loves the dungeon, the dragon, and a dungeon, dragon, and orc. That's a weird combo. But yeah, today we're going to talk about Ancestries Glory. Looks like the chat's way ahead of us. But before
they're already discussing it.
I know. Before we do that, we have Derik on once again because Derik is he's gonna be an honorary roll for combatian at this point.
That's right. Is that how do we what's the word, demify it? How do we?
I don't know. We'll call him Melendez.
A combator.
I kind of like that.
Am I a combator?
Sure.
Combator?
Well, you are. You're very combative.
Well,
combative.
Did you guys have a demonym for being at Paizo, Mark? Were you a Paizonian?
Paizonian, I think.
Okay.
Is one that people use for someone who's a Paizo.
Okay.
For the demonym.
Well, you guys just call yourselves knights, right?
Yeah, right. We just have ourselves as knights. It's easy when you actually have something that has a proper demonym, but you could a roller.
A roller. I kind of like roller.
Yeah, roller's good. So, anyways, but yes, honorary member, at least for purposes of these streams.
Well, you're always around, and you're good, and you're good.
It's a polite way of saying, yeah, he's not busy. He's got nothing going on. He's a loser.
He has no life. It's a nice way of saying he's got no life. He can just join us whenever.
That's correct.
I do actually reach out to a few. The big problem is that I don't usually do these streams until Monday or Tuesday. So I don't plan very far ahead. So it's not like, oh, we got someone who's going to be on the stream in like 2 weeks from now. It's like, I don't even know what I'm doing tomorrow.
Right. Well, I think the biggest advantage for me is I already do a live stream on Tuesday. So, going into Tuesday, I already have my light set up, my mic set up, my camera set up. So I'm already set to go. So when you ask me, hey, do you want to hop on today? I'm like, well, all I literally have to do is sign into the Zoom call. So it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier for me.
Yeah. I like having returning guests, and I like having new and a variety of guests, though I anticipate that Derik may be an interesting person to have on for this particular topic, given his antipathy towards some popular races / ancestors.
Well, he loves poppets. We're getting that out of the way right away. So
actually,
we all know that's his favorite.
That is his favorite. His favorite.
We actually have a really interesting thing that we can talk about too as we go into this actually today.
Oh, so I got extra. I have a lot of interesting things to talk about on this too, because I have firsthand knowledge on race and ancestries and popularity from World of Warcraft, which is going to be very fascinating.
Well, Steven, do you think that's the most firsthand of data that you have? I have.
You do too. We all have data.
I have the entire first month of D&D Beyond's
really
race distribution from 2017.
Okay.
And I have what Paizo has publicly revealed about the ancestry polling.
Wow.
I also know other stuff than that, but I'm not going to tell you.
Damn. So the three of us, we should be able to pound the crap out of this topic.
So I actually have a lot of real actual data.
Okay.
Although I don't have the Paizo data anymore, but I know what Paizo has publicly revealed, and I can restate it.
Log onto Linda's computer and get the data.
No. I'll only restate what has been publicly said.
Right.
Mark, I have discovered after working with you that you are lawful good. I don't care what anyone says. You are lawfully lawful good. You're not even lawful good. You make lawful good have a good name. I've never met someone so lawfully good. It's kind of scary.
In first edition terms, it's like he's lawful good with tendencies towards lawful good, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
he is.
I'm very chaotic in certain other ways.
No, you're not.
In certain ways. Trust me. He's
like, in certain ways. Sometimes I have chocolate milk instead of regular milk because I get a little crazy.
But when it comes to my space that I need to work in, it needs to be very disorganized and chaotic, or I just if you clean everything and put everything in piles and stacks, I can't use it.
That's not ancestry. I mean, that's not an alignment. I hate to break it to you, messy space.
I love the super chat from Cheese here.
What did he write? Jeez, while on the subject of ancestries, Mark, have you ever pondered a feat to let an ancestry gain another heritage? So a dungeon could be a tower or an island, for an example.
Oh, it delights me to no end that your April Fool's Day joke has become like a legitimate, like structured heritage that people and ancestry that people are not only embracing but are asking for content for.
Yeah, look, we're doing an expanded version in Year of Monsters.
I know.
We're doing it much bigger because I told you one day
how much people want a dungeon. Like,
geez,
I had always
love
told
it.
Steven if Dragon did well, maybe we should do more, but he wasn't sure, and that we legitimately could have had something else in this Kickstarter instead of Year of Monsters until Dungeon was just like, it changed Steven's mind. He's like, no, that was right. Let's do it. Let's do Year of Monsters.
Well, it wasn't that I didn't want to, and we'll get into this later. It's not that I didn't want to do Ancestries. I wanted to do the right Ancestries.
Right. And you didn't want to do them yet necessarily, but then people convinced you.
You're
always someone who wants to give. You're always someone who wants to give people the fans what they want. And
I also wanted to do it in such a way that, hey, thanks for subscribing. I want to do it in such a way that it gave fans something fun and unique, and that's why we're doing the Year of Monsters, and you'll get one every month. And I just like that idea. It's like, I don't want it to be, it's not Ancestry of the Month. It's a little different. You know, it's like you purchase all of them, and then you'll get all the Ancestries. We'll release them. And not only that, it'll also allow people to comment and talk about it and give us their feedback while it's occurring. So it's not that we're just doing it in a void. I feel like sometimes even the Dragon book, like the Dragon book was great and we put it out and we got a lot of feedback, but then it didn't get quiet, but it got a little quiet. I mean, people, trust me, people still playing dragons. I see people playing dragons. I hear about people playing dragons, but the book is out in the wild. And once a book gets out in the wild, people move on to the next best thing. But we do this, and it's funny because people still talk about dungeons. We keep it going, and then people will talk about gremlins or intelligent weapons and talk about, how they're using it in their games. And then we'll talk about, so it's like a constant evolved process, because in the end, when it comes to Ancestries, it's not just what we like. I mean, one of the main reasons they came out with goblins because everyone wanted it, and Leshy, because it's like, Leshy, I mean, you tell me that one, Mark, and it's like people wanted the Leshy, so they gave it to them because it's like people wanted it. So it's the same thing. Like, people want dungeons, they like dungeons, fine, we'll give you way more dungeons. Way more.
Yeah. It boggles my mind. But, it is what it is.
Why does it boggle your mind? It's actually in LitRPG culture and Japanese anime culture, it's not uncommon to play a dungeon.
Yes, although I think I'm not a big fan of the LitRPG.
Oh my god, I love it. I love it, LitRPG.
No, Steven, no.
Oh my god, I can't get enough of it. It's so good.
Gosh. So so we have a distinct group within our Patreon community that they love anime and they love LitRPGs. And in the Night Last Call,
so good.
Bob is our, kind of de facto anime guy, and they've got him into these LitRPGs.
This is what happened. John Stats, who is our Blizzard guy, who's on our staff and done a million things, and Gen Con, it was 3 years ago. I was in the car with him. He picked me up from the airport, and I was telling him all about LitRPG, and he couldn't believe it. Next thing I know,
he's writing one, right?
Not only did he wrote one, not only that, he read like 100 books in like 40 days. Like he's like, dude, I'm devouring. He couldn't get enough of it, and then he wrote 4 books. He's already written them and finished them and completed them, and they're coming out. He wrote 4 books, and they're good. I actually read them. They're really good because he worked for Blizzard for 10 years, so he's actually using all this game knowledge. He also did this very interesting thing, because in all these LitRPGs, the game company is evil. I mean, even Ready Player One kind of did this. Like the game company is kind of seen as evil, and he's like, you know what? He flipped it. The game company is actually not evil. They're just part of the conversation, and he did it from the point of view of the game company because that's his point of view. So it's really good, and he's been working on these for years, and his whole thing is about dungeons because he designed all the dungeons for World of Warcraft, and he designed he has a book it's literally called the Book of Dungeons. That's the name of the book series, and it's about dungeons. And look, more dungeons, and it's about dungeons and how you explore dungeons and the different types of dungeons and like the ecology of dungeons, the mechanics, and everything about dungeons. And
so should we answer Cheetah Ages' question?
Yes,
that was in the super chat.
There's a lot of dungeons going on here.
There is.
Anyhow, I'm going to get you an early reading copy, Derik.
Should give another heritage. I would say that normally that's not something we would normally want to do, just in terms of the fact that heritages give a different kind of thing than a feat does in some cases. Sometimes they give something that, like, for example, since it's known you only have one, it doesn't have a level on it. So its tends to scale more. There could be things that in heritages that are actually mutually exclusive. In certain cases, and there is like a less common Lamashtu only goblin feat that does this in Lost Omens character guide. In certain cases, you might be future-proofed enough that okay, it's fine if you gain this heritage, it won't do something that's mutually exclusive. But like, for instance, if you could get 2 of the dragon heritages in Battles of Ancestries Dragons, and there wasn't explanatory text, you wouldn't know what to do with a bunch of the other rules, because like based on which heritage you have, that opens up like your spell type and your unarmed attacks and your damage type and things like that. So I would say you want to be careful with doing that. There are some cases where you could make it work, but you might want to instead make a curated list or come up with some of the benefits of certain heritages that they can sort of have while being from the other heritage.
So we're going to talk about ancestries and just all about ancestries and what are people's favorites and why and all of that. And it is fascinating because this is one of those topics that people, I think they know the answer, but what's at least reality is not always what people think it is. Because, and I guess I'll start it off, is that so we have two podcasts, and one of them I said, okay, with the Three Rings Adventure Circus one, I was like, you guys can play any ancestries you want, any ancestry. And I said, there's no limits, everything goes. And they all play human, or actually they're half elves. It's like half elves or humans, all 4 of them.
Yep.
And I was like, really? I gave you anything. You could have been anything. And they're like, and they all did it. Which
I approve your player's decision.
Well, no, definitely not for a show. And then when it went to, but then the other group, my long-standing players, and I didn't even have to prod them. I said, look, you want to play humans, fine, but you guys have played humans to death. Like, play something else. And sure enough, we got a goblin, we got a tengu, we got a fiendish orc tiefling, and a human, one human. But even the human's a little bizarre the way he plays them. So at least we've got a nice mix, and it really mixes it up, because yesterday it was funny, because he was trying to, so the half-orc monk tiefling, who literally has the legs of like a satyr and has hooves, had to sneak down a hallway. And then, of course, he failed because I rolled terribly for him on the secret check. And we're like, yep, you're just clomping down, like clomp, 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 because he's got hooves. So it just, that little extra made it so much more fun. And, but that's the thing I was saying, is that people talk about all these ancestries, but push comes to shove, people play humans, man.
And,
it's like,
and I would have gotten that right, because I was going to say,
they always do.
I would have said that humans and or in Pathfinder 2 terms, right, like variant humans, like so also like
versatile heritage humans.
Yeah, well, I mean, like Asimar, tiefling, half elf, half orc, right, but still that human base.
Yep.
That actually doesn't surprise me at all, and restores a little bit of my faith in the
why
in the RPG space.
Why?
Well, for a variety of reasons, but I think the most important of it
what do you
is
hate
that
about puppets?
it's not that I hate Ancestries. It's that Well, I guess it's kind of a complicated answer, but I think what it really comes down to is, number one, I think a lot of people choose different ancestries because they want for lack of a better term, it's kind of like having a YouTube channel and buying subscribers. Like, I think a lot of people choose ancestries because they think it's going to just make them more interesting, like right out of the box, as opposed to actually, like, because being a human would be boring. But if I play my character the exact same way I was going to play them, but they are some weird, crazy, ancestry or race, that will make them more exciting and more interesting. It's like, I feel like it's kind of an attempt to sort of buy your way into being more interesting. And I think I said this before, but my second biggest problem is
you did.
that I don't feel like enough people, they choose Leshy or they choose, Tiefling, or they choose Gnome, but they don't really act or play as if they are this entirely different species from an entirely different culture with an entirely different outlook. They basically either do it because they like the chibi cuteness, or because, again, they think it makes them cool and edgy. So I mean, obviously I'm being general here, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who do lean into these things, but I would even go so far as to say that in general, as the RPG design space and community move away from what I would call racial stereotypes, and by that I mean species stereotypes, I think that makes it even less definitive as a ancestry, because at least the back of the day, it's like, I'm going to be a dwarf because I'm going to be the taciturn, dour, stubborn, grumpy dwarf, and I'm going to lean into that trope, and everybody's going to go, oh, he's such a dwarf. But we have now kind of dispelled with those biases and those stereotypes, and so now when you play a dwarf, it goes, what does that mean? What does being like a dwarf mean anymore? It doesn't mean anything, because you have people who play dwarves who are max charisma, freewheeling, very popular, social butterflies. And so without those sort of bases of, for lack of a better word, stereotypes of these sort of racial, species, ancestry stereotypes, now if I watch someone play, unless it got specifically mentioned, like, oh, you silly dwarf, or if I looked at their character sheet, I don't know in many cases that I would know what ancestry or race or whatever or heritage they are.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Actually, I mean, I think in our Agents of Edgewatch game, they play each ancestry pretty differently. So they actually do what you say, like the guy who plays the goblin is the goblin. Trust me, he talks about goblin stuff. He eats goblin things. He has goblin backgrounds. They're very much into their ancestry. So, but also these guys have been playing forever. So,
right.
They're really good players.
Essentially pro players.
Yeah,
right?
they're excellent players. And to them, this is part of the fun. At this point, part of their character is playing something different and weird. And that's actually, I would almost categorize, there's 3 types of ancestries. You have humans, you have humanoids, and then you just have everything else, aka alien, weird, bizarre. And most people will play humanoids. And then when you get to the bizarre, and I'll even include dragons in there, like you're just playing something that is just out there. That is just no analogy to humans or humanoids. It could be very different.
Right.
And
like the for me, that's peak of that is like Kanrasu, right? Like that's peak way the hell out there. Now here's what's crazy about this. Like, obviously I would want to play that, but here's the thing. If we were building a game that was very specifically tied about something in the Mwangi and this Kanrasu, almost kind of like a Ambassador Kosh Babylon 5 style, like and that ancestry, that Kanrasu, it was very, very specifically tied into what we were doing. Like, I actually would be, yeah, that's awesome that you are this shard of cosmic force given a physical. That's great. That's cool. But like when people pick it because like, and then they're like, I don't know, going to tea parties and going into the dungeon and climbing walls, it's like, I feel like you're selling that whole thing way, way short.
Yeah, I can see that. I will say, I know we all have anecdotal evidence and things to back it up, so I do want to tell a story. So here's an interesting story.
All right, story time.
Story time. World of Warcraft. So when they first came out with World of Warcraft, and they had the Horde and the Alliance, And obviously you have the Alliance, and the Alliance has...
Or the Alliance.
Yeah, they have the humans, they have the elves, they have the dwarves. I think they had gnomes. I'm trying to remember way back when with Vanilla WoW.
Original, it was night elves, humans, dwarves, and gnomes. That was the original 4.
Night elves.
That was when I was playing.
They add, believe it or not, there was actually only 6. And at the very last second, during the Friends and Family beta, they added Troll, and they added, I think Night Elves was added at the very last second.
Originally, that makes sense. They're in a very different part of the map than the others are.
And then so for Horde, they had Orc, Troll, Undead, and what was the 4th one? I don't remember. Tauren. Tauren was part of the original?
Yep.
No, they were there. I mean, maybe not in Friends and Family, but they were there in the very early days. They was there my project.
Until Burning Crusade, and then they added Draenei and
I love Draenei,
Blood Elves.
Yep. Well, let me get to that.
Okay.
So this is what happened. So they launched the game, and this is especially in Asia, and everyone knows this, or at least everyone who's old knows this, is that there was 3 times more people playing Alliance than playing Horde, which was a big shocker. But here's the problem. During Friends and Family, it was 50-50. During beta, it was 50-50. And everything they tested, it was 50-50.
So what did it? The Night Elves?
So I'm getting to it. So what they found out in the research is that everyone was playing a human or an elf.
Yeah.
Everyone. Well, especially Asia. Asia... I don't want to get to Asia. Asia was even more. Asia was like 5-1. It was so lopsided, and they built the game assuming parity. And there was a lot of issues because there was a lot of PvP. I won't get into all the issues.
So that's actually a really great point, because when I originally played World of Warcraft, I played on a PvP server where in a contested lands, right, you could fight. And I also played a lot of Battlegrounds. And what was interesting about it was the Alliance was horrible at PvP and Battlegrounds because so much of a large percentage of their player base was, for lack of a better word, filthy casuals, and they sucked.
Yes. Well, ironically, I was on Mal'Ganis, which was the only server in the world that had more Horde than Alliance, and I'll tell you why. That was, don't tell anyone this, that was secretly the World of Warcraft developer Blizzard place, so that everyone who played World of Warcraft, or who was in Friends and Family, or was from Blizzard, played on that server. And we told all of our friends, and we told everyone, don't play Alliance, because Alliance was built first, Horde was built second. Horde is much better because they knew what they were doing when they built Horde. So that server had way more Horde than Alliance. Was the only server that was the other way around. So let me get to the next point.
Yep.
They had to fix this. So that is where Blood Elves come from. And then you can come and they had all this like lore and crap. Nope. All fake.
I even heard that
all
as
made
someone
up.
Who wasn't even playing the game anymore at Burning Crusade. I heard
all
that,
made
I think
up.
It was publicly stated that everyone wanted to play elves, and so they wanted the pretty blood elves to be in the
they made Blood Elves gorgeous.
Yes.
And they even used, and I'm trying to be clean here, but they even used a lot of adult material when they designed the female elves to make them as sexy as possible, because they needed to get as many people on the Horde as possible to rebalance the servers.
Oh, I remember reading about how people are like, there's no pretty Horde race.
Correct. And trolls, they added trolls, and trolls, no one played troll. I didn't like, who wants to play troll? They were ugly as sin and terrible. I'm like, and they were by far the least. They still are like the least popular. But it is fascinating. The reason I'm bringing this up is that there's a real world example of what people are playing, even though they'll say, and in a controlled environment, it was 50-50, but then when it was released out to the world, people don't want to play ugly races. They didn't want to play something ugly, or, something that isn't a good personification of themselves. So even the ugly races, they had changed them around to make the orcs look prettier. so they weren't so ugly, and the trolls look prettier, so they even took them and beautified them. So, and if you look at them now, they're all pretty cool. They all look nice. Like, even the quote, there's no ugly races really in World of Warcraft, and they did that on purpose so that people are more inclined to play non-humans.
I think that's gonna be something that matters slightly more when there's a graphical visual avatar of your character that you're following around. However, you're going to wind up being not wrong when it comes to those 5e numbers, which I can bring up now.
So let's see what the 5e numbers are.
So let's take a look at now. Admittedly, this is the first month of D&D Beyond, August to September 2017. Not that many things were out yet. I mean, they didn't put things out very quickly. So guess what? Out of all 100,000 characters, or sorry, per 100,000, there were more than 100,000.
Yeah.
There were more than 100,000. So per 100,000 is how they did the statistics. So 25,000 and some, let's just say 25% were human. And not only were 25% human, but a lot of them were fighters. Like almost 5% were human fighters. Now by class, some certain things varied, right? Because elf was next with about 1/6 of people were elves. But if you were a fighter, you were more likely to be a dwarf than an elf, because about 2% of all of them were dwarf fighters, whereas only 1.2 for elf fighters. So now elves also had more rangers than humans did.
Of course.
More druids than humans did.
Of course.
They were about equal on rogue and wizard. Technically, elf had slightly more wizards and slightly fewer rogues. And then there were like very few elf barbarians and paladins and bards. So it was human, then elf, then half elf at 10.5%, then dwarf at 9.5%. You're getting it's the core ones, right? It goes down, dragonborn, tiefling. The one that's interesting because it beat some of their core races is genocide, the part elemental people. They got 6%, as opposed to halflings had a slightly lower thing that rounds to about 6%, and half orcs 5%, and gnomes 4.6. Yeah. So they had a statistically significant amount more. A lot of whom were like monks or sorcerers.
Right. I mean, at that point, you're getting down to like the margin of error, but.
Sure, but it is per 100,000, and it had more than 100,000 characters, so it's a margin of error, but it's with a lot of data points.
I think though that fundamentally, I mean, people talk about, I mean, both in a positive and a negative light. They talk about people play role-playing games for the escapism, or for the power fantasy, if you want to kind of take a more, I guess, negative version of that. And you're a human, so like it. I think maybe part of that desire is to literally see yourself as an avatar. And, as you go down that race, or you go down that list, okay, humans are obviously the most like humans. Elves are probably the second most like humans, or half elves, right? Where it's like, it's kind of a human, but they're prettier and they have, pointier ears. And then dwarves are probably the third most, and then halflings are the fourth most, and then gnomes are the fifth, right? Like as you go down that list.
Halflings were lost to dragonborn and tiefling. And Aasimar, here's the weird one. Aasimar were actually very low. Now, I'm wondering if Aasimar were like released in something that had just come out at that point in time or something like that. But they were less than half as many as Aarakocra, which were the second to least common, and they had like 1.7%. Right. It was very, very low compared to even Goliaths and Aarakocra. Whereas in Pathfinder, Aasimar and tieflings were basically among the most popular options outside of the core. So that was kind of interesting. Basically, if you want to know what were the most popular things, according to the playtesters for PF2, look at what's in the advanced player's guide. Because except for Duskwalker, which made it in on a sort of a like, I don't know, like it got pulled on the coattails. It's like, well, you have Aasimar and tiefling, so let's put in the ones in between them. Except for Dustwalker, all the other ones that are in there were just like those were all of the most popular.
Well, I mean,
choices.
We've seen memes for years, right, about tiefling edgelords, and like, oh, you want to be, you're unique and edgy, like with your tiefling, just like everybody else, right? Like, there's this sort of like, I want to be the anti-hero, I want to be the dark, mysterious ranger.
But Aasimar were actually slightly more popular than tieflings by one measure in Pathfinder, whereas I would not way less popular in D&D. It depends on whether you decide which one had most first place finishes versus which one had the best aggregate score.
Okay.
And I can't remember which one it was now, but Aasimar won by a lot in one of those two measures. And I said it at some point when I was at Paizo, in a public Paizo thing. It lost. Aasimar lost by a little in one to Tiefling, and it won by a lot in the other. So it was probably the stronger one overall.
How about this, Mark?
In D&D, I'm not really surprised that so many people went humans, though, just because of the fact that also D&D 5e players, we have to take into account this, right? Usually for many of them, their only game is 5e. Not true, all, but many.
Yeah.
And they may be new. So I think that what you're saying, well, everything that you've said about like you're a human, that may be especially true for someone who's just starting. And it's like, I'm just getting started with this. I don't want to put in all these other things I have to worry about. If I go with human, that's something I know.
I'll tell you.
Whereas if you have a Pathfinder player, they're more experienced on average, I would say, with multiple systems. And they may have played many other characters before. They may be looking for something new and different. Now, the interesting thing is that that is kind of known is that when it comes to PF2 players, it's a little bit different because those APG choices that were the most popular in Pathfinder first beyond the core rulebook, well, they had to wait until the APG. Some options that were not as popular from Pathfinder first, in one case, Leshy's case, because it wasn't offered on the poll as an option, were Lizard Folk, Leshy, and Hobgoblin. But they made it out much earlier in Pathfinder second because they were less popular. And so they were therefore like allowed to go into an earlier book that was not the APG, which was not like one of the big table leg books for the game. And so because of that fact, you'll see that Lizard Folk and Leshy have actually both picked up some momentum in PF2 purely because they got out like shortly after release. I think that's a big part of it, at least. Also, just Leshies have become a sort of a cult growing thing. So that is what I've seen in terms of like information that is available, and the D&D one is publicly available, and the Pathfinder is based on things that have been said before by Paizo.
How about this? What I want to see, I kept trying to say, is Starfinder, because Starfinder has a gargantuan number of ancestries.
Yeah. So at PaizoCon, they mentioned that Uplifted Bear is one of the most popular.
That I actually knew. I didn't know that.
They mentioned that Beyond the Core, Uplifted Bear is one of the most popular, but that there were others that were also pretty popular too.
It's interesting that you mentioned all that though, Mark, because I wonder at the same time if this had something to do right with Pathfinder 2, maybe in generic, and I'm speaking here sort of in generic platitudes, but like the Pathfinder 2 player is more being different is more important to the Pathfinder 2 player than it is to the 5e player, right? You have 5e players who I'm a spirit totem barbarian. I basically look like every other spirit totem barbarian that's being played in 5th edition right now.
But you probably never seen one before because you're new.
Right. But if you're playing Pathfinder 2, part of the reason you're playing Pathfinder 2 is, in theory, I'm not saying this is the only reason, but it's because you're like, I want to be different. I want to be unique.
I may have played 20 or 30 characters before. What makes this one different?
Right. There's this almost obsession with, I can't be that. I already was that, right? Like, I got to be something different. I got to be something different. And I wonder if that pushes people in the Pathfinder 2 space to almost to this, I don't even want to call it an obsession, but like this desire for like, give us more ancestries, give us more. Because at a certain point I go, how many do you need?
Well,
you need the one that's your favorite.
Let me use
Kitsune as an example, okay? Because the Kitsune ancestry was actually, I thought it was going to be very popular. in the overall ancestry listing because I knew enough people that were ridiculously, ragingly obsessed with it, but it actually wasn't. And that actually taught me that you could have an ancestry that doesn't have the numbers of like huge number of people who like it, but that the people who do like it, they really, really like it. It makes a huge difference for them, whether it exists or not. Like that's something that's not captured in these numbers, right? Like with 5e, it's probably less true because of the fact that people are more casual. But like, if we're like, oh, well, who cares about Goliath? Only 4.5% people played them, but maybe those 4.5% of them really liked Goliath. And I think that you'll find part of the reason to release new Ancestries is that even if only a small number of people play them, you'll have the people who are like really into them in a way that like, if you release a cool new feat or a magic item, it's much less likely.
And the thing with the Ancestries is that at least, and you see this in Starfinder. I don't know if you play any Starfinder, Derik, but I played a lot for a while. Is that the Ancestries you'll see as, and Pathfinder does this too, as the NPCs. So you might not necessarily see, if you can hear my dog barking, she's going crazy, is that not only, it's like, yeah, you might not have anyone playing as these Ancestries, but you'll see NPCs as these Ancestries. And to be honest, that helps make the NPCs memorable, because how many times do you see an NPC who's just some generic bartender, is like a human bartender? You'll never remember them. But like we're having, I said it before, we're having intelligent weapons as an ancestry. And you go to the magic shop and you see a magic staff as the shopkeeper. You won't forget that encounter. It's like, or as you said, uplifted bear. You go to the tavern and the barkeep or the person running the tavern is a dignified, uplifted bear. You won't forget that. It adds a lot of dimension to the game.
Wasn't there a bear that was like Janice from accounting or something like that? That was in a Susie from accounting, maybe somebody from accounting. It was a bear.
Yeah.
And I still remember this, even though I never played that Starfinder adventure or even read that Starfinder adventure.
Yeah, and
just because it was a bear.
And that's what helps, is the Ancestries help, I think. Strangely, I think they help the GMs more than the PCs.
I actually will agree with that. Actually, I actually do agree with that a lot. Because I find that not only is that I'm obviously getting traction with, identifying, this NPC is this, unique, component to make them stand out more. But I also find that the GM tends to sell the strangeness or the oddity of that ancestry a bit more than a PC will, because a PC is natural. I mean, it's very common to them because that's what they are, right? Whereas I think as a GM, if you say, it's a Knoll bartender, you're gonna like kind of play it up as this is a little odd, this is a little unusual. They're being however in whatever way. Yeah, I mean, so I do agree with that statement.
We got him to agree with something.
I did. But so here's what I want to point out, though. This is about Ancestries and thing. So the crazy thing is the game that we have been sort of gushing over the last month or so in the Knights and in the Knights Patreon. We always have a game that really is catching everybody's attention. This month and potentially a game will be starting, whether for the internet or for our home game, is Root. RPG, which is a Powered by the Apocalypse game.
Yep. You're gonna play Root.
Yeah, oh yeah. And
nope, don't believe it.
Okay, and so by the way, for people at home, I don't know if you can see this. So Root, like, you are anthropomorphic animals.
Yes, you are.
And and the art style is pretty cutesy. But I absolutely love this. This is fantastic. A+, way to go. Very excited to be a badger person with a greatsword. Now that might seem crazy but here's why. Because I feel like it has a context in the world of Root, which they call the Woodland. And the game leans into, number one, your choice of ancestry in that game has no mechanical benefits. You just pick it. Now, there are fictional truths. Like if you're a bird, you can fly. If you're a mole, you can dig. But that's not like a mechanic. It's just, that's what birds do. But more importantly, the game talks about how if you're a fox person, you might be a little more cunning, a little more sly, a little bit more, dare I say, roguish. If you're a badger person, you're going to be more like a badger, I don't know, stubborn and taking offensive things easily. I like that because it's not just a race at that point. It's also kind of a culture. And that was something I think is important. We are doing with our Knights of Last Call game in Quest for the Frozen Flame. Everybody is a human, but mostly because they are in the realm of the Mammoth Lords. And we really wanted to lean into that culture, which is almost predominantly human. But they aren't just human. They are, well, 3 of them are Kelid humans. And that ancestry might just be human, but the culture is very different than, say, a human in, somewhere else in Absalom or in, Varesia or something. And I think leaning into cultures for me personally is very, very interesting. Because I think that shapes a lot of how you respond. Now, back in the day, we used to equate culture with race, right? And we've broken that, right? The same way that we've broken alignment with race, which I think probably ultimately is a good thing, right? Not all drow come from, trademark infringement pending, but not all drow come from the same exact cultures. We used to assume that being a certain species meant that your culture was this. So now we've broken that. That's great. But I think that the culture column is very important. And I think it is something that players need to think about when they choose an ancestry. Don't just think about the ancestry. That's the surface, right? That's the surface of your character. The culture that ancestry implies, I think, is important as well.
I think another thing to think about now that we're talking about those furry animal characters, I guess I brought it up with Kitsune before, to roll all the way back when, Derik, you were saying that for some people, what they want to play is a human because it's a character like them. There are a subset of role players who have a fursona that is like one of these ancestries. So for them, having the ancestry that matches them allows them to play a character that's like them. So in that case, some of these animal-headed ones in particular have that particular niche worth of people who are just going to be really excited when they see that character appear.
So I do want to mention before we get too far, first of all, like, subscribe. You can super chat. You get your answers answered right away. You can subscribe to the channel. You can say after digression, and you can super chat. You can become a member, and if you're a member, you get cool icons and stuff. We'll figure out what the stuff is. Actually, I kind of know what the stuff's going to be, but here's the best part: is that
give them an old cheese.
In
honor of Cheese of Ages,
and we should easily
really
get
old cheese.
Old cheese, fine. I love cheese. I can easily do that. If we get 50 likes, which should be very easy because we got way more than 50 people watching, we're gonna make Derik.
Oh no.
Do something that he probably won't. No, actually, I don't know. We'll figure something out.
Do a Poppet impersonation.
Poppet. Well, I wanna see. Do you have your costume of when you're gonna play a Leshy? Is that around?
No, not yet because we're not going to. It's not. The adventure isn't even released yet.
I have a copy. Do you want me to send you a copy so you can start working on your?
It's not legal for them to
I know.
Right.
That's true.
Also, I am not running this adventure. I am playing in.
So
in
you're gonna Derik has to dress up as a wildflower, as a sunflower.
Yes.
So
as a Leshy.
A Leshy. So we're gonna do some fun things with that. But so one thing I do want to mention, I'm going to switch over to it real quick. So one of the main reasons we're also talking about this is because we're going to be doing Year of Monsters, which everyone knows that, not everyone, but most people probably know that we released Dungeon Ancestry for both Pathfinder and 5e, where you can play dungeon. And it was an April Fool's joke that went way too far and had way too many levels.
It really did.
It really did. It went to the point that people still talk about it. And I said it would be legendary.
You're saying it went way too far. I'm the one who had to write it.
You had to write it, but I had to, I had to
lay it out.
I had to lay it out and get it out. And we both had a lot of work to do. It's just different work. And, but now, we're going to do an extended version, and we're doing Year of Monsters, and we've announced the Gremlin, the Demon, the Intelligent Weapons, and
the Dungeon Expanded.
Dungeon Expanded. But from now on, until the actual Kickstarter, which is the end of July, we are going to give you at least approximately a week to go over the new Ancestries. And if you're a member, subscribe to our newsletter, you'll find out that we announced today that you will be able to play an Oni. Yes. And why don't you tell a little bit more about this monstrous ancestry? Very cool ancestry.
So in the Pathfinder setting, because we're using the OGL Oni as the basis for this, the Pathfinder setting, Oni arise after a pretty tragic backstory, which may not even be their own fault. It depends, it varies from Oni to Oni. Basically, and you can read this in the newsletter, like in character, where I made a new NPC who's sort of like an advocate for monstrous ancestries. And basically you have these kami, and they are a spirit. They have a ward that they're supposed to protect that's somewhere around in nature. And sometimes that ward gets destroyed anyway, right? Like sometimes that's because the kami is asleep on the job, but sometimes it's just not their fault. Just something happens. In Pathfinder's setting, there was one kami who this happened to, who just like a really powerful above 20th level sorceress just kind of grabbed half of his ward and just threw it into a demi-plane. Like there was nothing he could have done. So at that point, the gods are just really cruel and unfair to these kami, or maybe they're fair if it's the kami's fault. And they say, well, you are now going to become disembodied. You're going to exist eternally in a state where you can like vaguely see what's going on in the world, but you can't interact with it in any way. And yeah, that's kind of torture. So they can either choose to accept this eternal punishment, or if they eventually get like disturbed enough by this, they might work together with some evil forces that are going to try to corrupt them when they do this. And just through their desire to like act with the world again, they form a body on the material plane. And at that point, they become Oni. Up until that point, they're just kami who are being tortured for, maybe it's their fault, maybe they're not. Once they become Oni, they are, in traditional lore, they're definitely corrupted by an evil deity or force. In the Golarian setting of Pathfinder, there's a specific deity who does this, but obviously in other settings, it would be something else. However, we are positing this. What if some of those kami who come back are able to hold on to themselves? They say no to the evil force that led them a helping hand to come back, and is like, now I will give you the power to rule, and you were unable to do anything. Now you could just sate all of your desires in the world. And he's like, okay, thanks. I'm not taking that power. No, I'm going to do this on my own. I'm going to be my own thing. I'm going to be maybe a hero. Maybe I'll go back and figure out what happened with my ward. Like, why did this go wrong? This wasn't my fault. Maybe I'll right similar wrongs. Maybe I am going to be a little bit hedonistic, but I don't need you on my back forcing me to become a fiend who is going to have to become pure evil. And that is in essence is the Oni ancestry. It's a character who has overcome like an adverse and very unfair punishment, but also was able to basically deny a temptation of more power in exchange for keeping more of themselves through a transformative process. That's Oni. So that's what we got.
That's what we got. So what do you think of this one, Derik? Is this one weird enough? And you see, it has enough of a backstory that you can really build on top of. You don't even need to have so much of it as a culture, because the background is so rich.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that this is one of those situations, though, where like if you are leaning into that and using that in your game, that's awesome. And like if you are playing a very freewheeling emergent game where the player can really explore and push those concepts and ideas, but if you're playing that, if you're playing that ancestry and you're just like playing through, abomination vaults or something like, and you're just kind of like, yeah, I just took it because of that sick ancestry feat at level 5. You're like, okay, I mean, I guess,
yeah, I get it. I mean, I don't know. I guess it's just, I haven't played a game like that in a long time. Cause like give you an example, like So the game where everyone's a human, it turns out that I was like, fine, you're all going to be humans, and you're going to have backstories that I'm making up, and they're finding out about themselves that things aren't what they think they are. Like one of them, it turns out that his mother was a night hag, and he was abandoned because he was male. And now his mom is trying to get him back and do things with him. And so like, and like I brought in literally the mother into the story. The other one, Lauren's playing, she thought she was human, but she was actually sold into the circus. And it turns out she's half a Freet. And she needs to go to City of Brass to find out her heritage and her family. So these are things, I mean, they kind of let me do this, but...
Right. Your players obviously have a lot of, well, I mean, obviously your situation is you're a show, you're a game, you're
right.
pro. Like, I love that. Everything you're saying. I'm like, oh yeah, that actually is really, really cool. I don't know how many people, well, number one, I don't know how many GMs would be willing to do that. Number two, I don't know how many players would be okay with their GM doing that. Number three, there's a lot of GMs out there who would go, oh gosh, a side journey to the City of Brass to investigate my secret Ifrit heritage. The GM sitting there going, I'm just trying to run chapter 4 of the adventure, you know, like,
yeah, I get it.
But to be clear, I think what you described is way, way, way cooler and way more interesting. You know, I remember we played an Eberron campaign in 3.5, the 3.5 edition, and I don't know, spoiler alert for a campaign that nobody played 20 years ago, but like there, the number 13 is very important in Eberron. There's 12 dragon marks, and there's a missing 13th one, which is the mark of death, which was eliminated, and marks are genetic. And without a player's permission, because why would it be his permission? There were all these people who were trying to kill this character, and it turns out because he was basically had the sort of the Quisas Haderach, he was going to be a bearer of this mark of death gene. And so people wanted to kill him before it developed, and he became awakened to its power. And the whole campaign ended up kind of revolving around this thing. And even some of his PC allies ended up siding with the enemies because they said, you're right, you're too dangerous to be left alive. Like, we can't allow this to be left into the world. And the final fight of the campaign was actually the PCs versus the PCs. Because they decided that he couldn't be allowed to live.
Did the Lich show up?
No, she did not. Although there were people from the Blood of Vol. But
right, fair enough.
Because to be clear,
one of my only Eberron characters also had a Vol dragon mark. So
okay, yes. I was never really quite sure because they were kind of dodgy with the actual lore in that world. So I kind of took my own spin on it and made it own thing. But yes, essentially it was he had ancient elven blood that gave him the bloodline of from Vol. Anyways, although I did read like one novel from that series as well, but I didn't.
There you go.
But anyways, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of cool thing. But again, we really lean into that. And so his ancestry, this heritage, became a defining part of the game. But the other way to look at it is to look at your game like Star Wars, right? Like maybe not
Cantina.
Like the Cantina, or maybe not the original film, because the original film was fairly humanocentric. But like if you look at any of the other shows, you'll have like the cockpit of a ship, and it'll be like, I don't know, a hut pilot with a Wookiee, cocktail waitress, and a 3-armed person and it's not a big deal. It's almost like ancestries in Star Wars are almost kind of meaningless, right? Like there's so many and it's so diverse, it's not even a big deal. Are we going to talk about the Wookiee cocktail waitress? No, Wookiees are just a Wookiee.
So back a little bit, you were saying that you don't like it when people are just like, I picked this ancestry just because this level 5 feet is really powerful.
Well, I
think that more people do the other thing you don't like, where they do it just because the ancestry is wahoo or they want to stand out. I don't think that, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that many people in PF2 are picking an ancestry specifically for power reasons, not because they're interested in its theme.
Well, I was going to
or at least an ancestry other than human.
I was going to say, I don't know. A lot of humans are humans because they really like that extra class feat at level 1.
Meaning that when they pick a weird ancestry, I don't think very many are picking that over human for power reasons.
Right, because it's interesting too when you were talking about the Pathfinder or the 3rd edition or whatever, or maybe the 5th edition,
the 5e.
But I was thinking about it in terms of PF1 and 3e, where it's like, well, humans were probably the strongest race, if not tied with elves, in terms of just raw power. And then because I remember if like you calculated using the was it ultimate race for PF1 and you used all the point system and added it up, like elves and dwarves had way many more racial build points than any other race. So like they were just fundamentally more powerful races. And then obviously everyone loved getting that free feat. And that's always been, I'm sure in 5e there's probably more versatile humans than anything that could possibly
I'm sure versatile humans are another part of the human dominance on on that first month of D&D Beyond, right? Some of it is new players just being like human, but I'm sure versatile human is a big part.
Yeah, because in that game you don't even get a feat until you get your first ASI, and that's not till level 4, I think.
And that is if you're willing not to put all of your first ASI into your prime stat.
Correct. So you wouldn't even get a feat for 4 levels, and that's if you give up your ASI. So that is very much, I think, a drawing attention. But I know that there's plenty of people who go in my games, and I've seen it. And by the way, we run a mega Pathfinder 2 game, so we have like 75 players who play Pathfinder 2 on our custom Forge servers, and there's like 90 something characters, tons of humans, and if you look at them, many of them have heritage, versatile, feat, natural ambition. Like they all have an extra general feat, which they used to take usually fleet or incredible initiative, and then they have an extra class feat at level 1. Like, and in terms of like painting a picture of who your ancestry is, that is about as boring and generic as it possibly gets. Like, you're like, oh, I have ambition, so I have sudden charge and power attack at level 1. It's like, that's what defines my race. That's what defines my heritage.
Humans are very ambitious and they're really, really into their class.
That's the problem, is that they made humans too strong. It's like humans, if they got rid of all of that, I think humans just simply wouldn't be played as much if they didn't give them so many bonuses.
Yeah. So the question is it a chicken or the egg scenario? Mark, maybe you can think about this.
No,
do they give humans great powers and advantages because they know that people want to play humans and they don't want them to feel like they are being forced into playing something that isn't a human? Or do people pick humans because they are so good mechanically?
I think it's a little bit of both. Like Pathfinder is a humanocentric setting where humans are the vast majority in most places. Now, some other ancestries have some really good stuff in them, but being able to take a class feat is being able to take something that's not even from your ancestry. And that is something that to many people, their concept is more closely tied to their class than their ancestry, which is a success, by the way, because it should be true, right? Like your human barbarian and dwarf barbarian should be more similar than a dwarf barbarian and a dwarf wizard. Just like they should. If a dwarf barbarian played more similarly to a dwarf wizard than a human barbarian did to a dwarf barbarian, that's a failure of the fantasy that Pathfinder is trying to tell, the story that Pathfinder is trying to tell. And so ultimately, there's some strong stuff in some of these ancestries that is maybe stronger in terms of ancestry options than what a human has. But humans' ability to go deeper into your class, which is sort of like more directly what you're doing in combat in many cases,
right,
is very attractive. And it's meant to be. It's designed to be. Like, you want to, it's attractive, and it's attractive to a wide variety of classes and a wide variety of players. And if you didn't do that, that would be a problem with the idea that it's a humanocentric setting, that there's many humans, that there's a rich number of ethnicities and cultures, as you were talking about, with humans to explore, because the actual like player base of adventurers, if you had, let's say if humans like were not an all-arounder who had something that was pretty strong option that people might like in a lot of situations. Let's say they had like a bonus to charisma because they were like loud and they want to have relationships with every ancestry out there, and they had a penalty to wisdom because humans are gonna make a mess for themselves and like not clean it up. And they had a bonus to con because, well, they can survive even despite that, like cockroaches. And then they didn't have this class thing, but they had some other like very specific and powerful abilities for certain situations that wouldn't tell the story that is meant to be told. So I would say it's both. But there was definitely specific design that was intended to make them something that would universally be a baseline of, well, I could also play human. That'll give me the thing from my class.
So actually, I want to ask the chat. By the way, we need 50 likes. We're at 38. 50 likes, and we're going to make Derik build the poppet. He had to make a poppet character.
And do a voice for the poppet.
And the voice for the poppet. We're going to make him, if he's going to have to play a poppet, what type of poppet would he play? It's like Peter Piper picked the pickle peppers. What type of poppet would Derik play to pop? It's a lot of peas in there.
Maybe he would be a stuffed plushie poppet.
Stuffed plushie poppet. Maybe he would be.
I don't even know all of the.
Well, we'll help you. Mark, I'm sure, has memorized everything, so he will walk you through it, so we can figure this out.
Yeah, I can help you pick your
Oh my god! I looked at what it just got 10 likes.
It just suddenly went up by like 10 likes.
Look at that! Oh boy, look at that! Oh boy, that was amazing! I just said that, and boom, the likes went up all the way up. We're almost there. Up 50. There we go. 50 likes.
Oh my gosh! All right.
Okay, so Derik, are you ready to make your new favorite character?
Your new favorite character ever?
No. Well, this is if I'm gonna make a poppet, okay,
he'll be named Mr. Buttons.
The culture of your poppet,
Mr. Buttons.
Derik, it's very important not just to say you're playing one. You need to understand. Poppet-only settlements, they don't really exist because these are just like usually like a really weird situation where they come to life and get awakened with a spark of life.
You would think that, but then how many people have like parties full of poppets? And the answer is quite a few.
But they still aren't enough to form a whole settlement.
Because I'm already playing something that's horrific, I'll probably be a poppet that was raised by gnomes, and I'll dual wield gnomish flick maces.
All right.
So when you say that you were raised by gnomes, did you awaken to a fragment or life force or a piece of a soul of an actual gnome
Here we
at
go.
the moment of that gnome's death that found its way into your constructed body?
Here's what happened, right?
Were you like a little toy that a gnome built?
All right, no. So there was a gnomish inventor, gnomish storyteller.
Okay.
And his name was I'm trying to think of Jim Gnomeson. And what he did is he created all of these stuffed animals to be used for storytelling and educating of children. They were stuffed, but they could move around, right? They weren't just ordinary puppets. He was trying to come up with another name for them that could represent how they might be represented. So he made a bunch of them. Like
did he call them moppets?
Yeah, he might have called them moppets. But then what happened is the gnomish lands were invaded. And everyone was trying to figure out a way to help defend the homeland. And he thought, what can I do? Well, I have this veritable army of all of these stuffed creations I made. I am going to imbue them with a semblance of life and then teach them the way of war so that they can defend the gnomish lands against the incursions that are threatening us. And so he chose one or chose a bunch of them and awoken them. And of course, being gnomish culture, they all have the feat that they were raised by the gnomes. And then he was able to wield dual flick maces. And that's how he, this puppet came to be. And,
so would you say that it's a stuffed puppet? Or that it was brought to life by an earnest, powerful wish of an innocent person who loved you very much?
No. This is a stuffed puppet for sure. Inside.
That means you'll take no falling damage, regardless of the distance you fall. And I'll recommend the feat Nothing But Fluff.
Okay.
Which is a good one to take, where it's just like there's only fluff inside of you, so you take a lot less damage from precision damage. You could still rip out some of your stitches, right? But there's no organs. So
and of course, being dual wielder, dual strike, he'll go full into the fighter thing. And because
absolutely,
because we're in Galarian and there's no IP here, and it's been a while since I did this, so Hold on a sec. Hold on. Kermit the Fighter here, coming to you live from Roll for Combat. I'm a dual wielding fighter, wielding gnomish flick maces. It's not easy being a fighter. Sometimes I wish I were a more interesting class like barbarian or alchemist or something like that.
This is why you're on the show every
There
week.
we go.
There, and that is Kermit the Poppet.
Wow.
Or the Moppet, right?
The Moppet.
The Moppet. So Moppet, Kermit the Fighter, not Kermit the Frog. Kermit the Fighter.
So we actually know quite a lot about this character. I would say that we could even we have almost everything we need to build the character up to level 5, except your first level feat. So let's decide about that. Are you very helpful and you're good at helping people with tasks? Do you have shiny button eyes that reflect the smallest details in the dimmest light? Can you just look like a regular Moppet by just sort of Kermit collapsing onto the floor and people think that you are not an animate doll? Or do toxins seep out of your artificial Moppet body quickly because of the fact that you only have stuffing inside?
By the way, this is where you lose me on everything. Where it's like, oh, it's full of cotton and stuffing, or it's like, or is it weeping poison? Because it's so edgy and it's so horrific. No, definitely.
Yes, its orifices weep poison.
Yes.
I mean, it's already
Well, maybe it was
weird
stuffed with like poison ivy.
It's weird in a setting for like something that affects plants and humans and bugs and dragons and all of those things too.
Yeah,
everything. So at that point, you might as well just affect all living creatures.
Yeah, I mean, in spirit of the Moppet, I'm guessing I either need shiny button eyes or I need a harmless doll. On the other hand, Kermit was on Sesame Street and at times, so helpful Poppet isn't completely out of the spake. But
that's a good point.
But given that he was originally designed to be a performance doll, I think we have to go with harmless doll. I mean, I think.
Okay, so yeah, harmless doll, that makes sense. So that means that you could just kind of collapse onto the floor and people will think you're just an inanimate doll without you even needing to roll unless they search carefully.
Right. And then when they walk past me, I spring up behind them and I start dual wielding flick maces.
You murder them with the flick maces, which you may need to hide because you may not look like a harmless doll with like
no.
real flick maces.
No, they look like, when you see Kermit's arms.
Action figure.
You know when you see Kermit's arms, how he has the little control rods that stick out of his wrist?
And you know what?
Those are
Kermit moves his arms around. It's called a Kermit flail, right?
That's right.
And these are from the flail weapon group.
Yeah, so that's perfect. Exactly.
Kermit flail.
The way I attack is where I go, here's the enemy. Oh! Now, I'm making fun
Aren't
of
you even at least a little excited to play that as like a joke character?
Yeah.
No, here's the funny. I play that as a joke character, sure, like one time for charity or something. But there are people out there as we speak who are playing. They're like, I'm playing that character. I'm going to play that character for 7 months. I'm going to play that character in a 1 to 20 AP. It's like, what is wrong?
I'm going to play that character in a grim noir setting.
Oh, right, the grim noir. I'll use my soft cotton body to help staunch the blood of the dying.
That pig walked into the door and
that's what red caps do.
So there we go. That was my my moment.
That was you fully committed. I'll give you credit.
There we go.
Did not expect that.
I do not nothing but fully commit.
I could tell. Now that is that's a character. That's a fully fleshed out character with background and inspiration and a voice. That's the voice. Right. You have to talk like that forever.
Kermit the Derik the Knight of Let's Call here. It's been a long time since I've done my Kermit impression.
It's pretty good. It's actually
gotta get
very good. It hurts though, I imagine.
After a little while, it gets a little bad.
You know what? That's right. We can write this up. Yeah, Galarian in Death. You can write up the Kermit Flail, the 2-action attack all enemies within reach.
That's right.
It's like a whirlwind. Flick maces, a whirlwind attack.
Because that's what Pathfinder 2 needs: more weapons.
Or no, it's not a new
It's not
weapon.
a weapon. It's a new attack.
An action that uses flick mace as your favorite weapon.
Yeah, it's your flick mace. Actually, that should be 3 actions to balance that out.
No, stop. Okay, listen. You're a game designer, and you're a game designer, and you own a game company. Stop. No, I'm going to say this here. I have a platform. The thing about Pathfinder 2 is everybody, it's part of the marketing. I don't know. Go to Pathfinder 2. It's got 3 actions. D&D sucks. It only has 2 actions. In this game, you get 3 actions, 50% more actions. So then don't make things 3 actions unless it's like legitimately like trample is 3 actions, and that feels okay because you're like, I'm going to move and I'm going to make 17 attacks, or I'm going to hit 7 people. That's fine. But like, when you have 2 or 3 action things, you're kind of like, wait a second, I thought I was supposed to be doing more in this game, not less. And that's
why so few things have 3 actions.
Yeah, but if you're going to be able to attack 8-9 things at once,
then just don't give me that option. I don't know.
Oh no, I give you that option because when it comes up,
it comes up. It's probably 3 actions. Yes, but that's only if you have an unlimited number. You could make a 2-action version that attacks up to a few things in your reach.
You can do like a heal spell. You can make it a range. So then they can decide, and it's like 1 action is a single attack, 2 action is maybe like a double or even triple attack.
Up to 3 different creatures.
Yeah, 3 different creatures. That's pretty standard.
Is everything.
Yeah, that's standard balance.
All right. Well, let's just say that as a cleric with lots of heal spells and selective energy or whatever it's called, I spend a lot of my time just going, everybody heal for 45. I'm done.
Well,
I do 2 actions more than 3 myself, but I like having the ability to do both depending on what the situation warrants. Well, it depends on what you're fighting too. If you're fighting a lot of AoE things, you'll need the AoE heal, but if you're taking a bunch of the boss's damage on like 1 character, the 2-action spike heal is really important too.
No, it's a lot of healing. I'm just saying there's a lot of turns where
that was actually very informative. I go
reach 2-action spell.
So someone actually said here that we should do the year of the cute ancestries.
Please God, no.
Well, we're not quite doing that, but I did want to show.
I mean, gremlins can be somewhat cute. They're also kind of terrifying.
Cute. They're pretty terrifying. I did bring up here, we have the Squirrel Ash Eldedex entry, because if you are a subscriber, our newsletter, just go to news.rollforcomment.com or just go to eldamon.com. We released this today, and we're going to release a whole bunch. And actually, Derek, you saw a couple of these.
I did. You did. You sent them over to me.
Yeah. And what'd you think?
Well, I was interesting. The Squirrel Ash is a foot and weighs 11 pounds, but the snake is like 2.5 feet and only weighs a couple pounds. I didn't realize snakes. Well, I'm assuming this is based on some.
Yeah, they're pretty light.
Really light.
They're very light.
Surprised.
Yeah, I was
snakes are very light.
That snakes.
Whereas the otter is actually really heavy because it's actually literally made of ice, and ice is actually pretty heavy compared to fire.
Yes, but we're going to be releasing these on a common base, pretty often, and we're going to have ours. Weirdly,
the weight is like one of the hardest things. You have to look up.
Well, Mark's the one who's writing all this, so I just do the layout. But so yeah, we're coming up with these nice little. Do you remember these, Derek? Do you remember when you were a kid and they used to have those cards of animals you can get from like Natural Geographic, and you would get that in the mail, and you would get the little container and you could keep all the cards in. It's like, here's the elephant, and you would pull it out, and like, here's the giraffe,
and it's got all the stats about
it has all the stats, man. That's so I was thinking, this is it, man. You could just put them all in. You could just pull out the Squirrel Ash, and you're just like, here you go, and it has all the information. So that's what this basically is just a little info on each one, and we will have the element, the form, the rarity, the source. They're, at least all these are coming from the first book. The battle form, the evolve forms, their preferences, and that's how you evolve them, make them like you more, and you become more friendly.
Befriend them in the first place.
Befriend them. Like squirrels love to collect things. I love Mark's description. They love collecting things, but since they're made of fire, it often burns to a crisp. And they're like, I got my cute little thing. Oh, I lost it. And then they do get another one.
I might have missed this. Do Eldamon speak?
in general,
or does the squirrel lash just go squirrel lash?
They understand languages. They can't necessarily vocalize
they're like dogs.
as well as we can, because they don't necessarily have vocal cords that are meant to make those sounds, but they can make they can make it known. At the very least, they could use sign language, and some of them could probably speak.
Yeah. So you're saying, 11 pounds is too much for a squirrel lash, but you don't know what's inside them. They could have coal in them, or
no, he was saying that the snake amount was low.
I just
no. In chat, someone was saying that the squirrel's too heavy for 11 pounds.
Well, if you look at like a cat, right, and so a cat,
a big squirrel, by the way,
a little over,
I can't believe
a little over a foot long cat would probably weigh somewhere around 10 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that the squirrel lash is about the weight of a cat.
So let me ask, if we made a squirrel ancestry, would Derik play it?
Like, you mean a squirrel person?
Yeah. No, it's squirrel ancestry. Like squirrel.
Are we playing Roots?
Yes. You're playing Root. The funny thing is I actually do like Root a lot. I want to play Oath. That gets a lot of good reviews, although they say you have to play with the same people. It's the same company. And I'm kind of surprised. I would play that RPG in a second. Oh, you have Oath. Look at that.
Yeah,
it's unopened.
Unopened. Well, I played it on TTS, and I was like, okay, I have to own this game. So
if you ever want to play it on TTS, I will play. Because I hear really good things. I hear it's one of those games you got to play multiple times with the same group.
It's what they call a legacy light game.
Yeah.
So I
only play legacy games almost exclusively.
So you're not like
point.
destroying cards and like
right,
erasing things on the thing. But yes, the effect from the last game, basically whoever won the last game starts off the next game as like the person in charge. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I would definitely want to try that out. And I asked them about that because all their art is the same. I was like, how the hell do you do that? Because that's really hard to do. It's one person in house. Thank God.
Yes. Kyle Farron is his name.
Because if it wasn't for that, that guy's got a...
Yeah, they have him on like full
retainer. Because it's pretty hard. I've learned that the hard way. It's also very risky to have one person do all your art.
It is, especially so much of your brand identity comes into it. But,
especially them.
But yeah, anyways. Good stuff.
But so what is everyone's favorite ancestry in the chat? I want to see what everyone likes.
We can see if it matches with the demographics.
Yeah, just tell us what you like. But not just what you like. I mean, there's also what you like and what you play. Yeah. And like, I'm trying to think.
Some people like one thing, but that's not what they actually play.
Okay, so this is another thing that I've seen many times. And I used to do a lot of Pathfinder Society. Is that, so I'm not exactly super tall. But I love to play the big ancestries. I love the bigger the better. The taller the bigger they are, the more I like them. Like, it's funny. I played Tauren.
Do you name your Tauren Napoleon?
No, my name of my Tauren was Battle Cow.
Okay,
you're one of those players.
Yes, everyone forgot his name. Battle Cow.
In World of Warcraft, I almost exclusively played dwarves and gnomes.
There you go. I played Undead first, and then I played Tauren, actually.
A lot of that had to do with the starting zone I really liked. But I would say that, obviously I've probably played a lot of humans in my time of being a PC. But I've probably played a lot. In Pathfinder 1, actually, a lot of my PCs were gnomes. And I've played a couple of dwarves, and really not... And probably, I would say probably half elf. Like those are probably my most common ones that I play.
Yeah.
And human.
But it's funny, I do notice, so short people, and this is not always true, but I did know a lot of short people do like to play really big, tall creatures. Funny thing is, I was in a game and it was like this really, really tall guy, and he was playing like a sprite. It's like playing the shortest, tiniest, ancestries you can find.
Small, like people who are short and like small ancestries. And
of course, really tall, right? Big ancestries. And then you have like John Wayne, who was enormous, who wore lifts and had all of his cast members cast that were very short, and they even built the sets at 90% size to make him look even bigger. It's like he literally couldn't get big enough. As much as he wanted to be big, he would be even bigger.
Point, we just call that an inferiority complex. And
you know what? That's also called Hollywood, because if you look at the Spider-Man movies, Tom Holland is much shorter than Zendaya.
Correct. But they actually play that. I mean, they show that on the screen.
No, they're the same height on the screen because he's much shorter, and they're always the same height. But they're dating in real life, and they're not even close to the same height.
No,
she's much taller than him.
Right,
and,
I've seen it.
And actually, I worked in Hollywood. It's one of my other things I did. I worked on MTV. I was in charge of celebrities, and everyone in Hollywood is either really, 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 really short or gargantuan. I remember everyone was like my height. I couldn't believe how many people who were like really short. It was very common, incredibly common that people were very short in Hollywood. And the biggest, I met Ray Liotta, and Ray Liotta was enormous. I couldn't believe how big this guy was. I was like, oh my God, he was huge, huge guy. But yeah, it's, and you know what? That's something else. It's very secretly, everyone in Hollywood, everyone, at least back then, played World of Warcraft. They loved it because there's a lot of downtime on set.
Yeah, right, of course.
And they're playing World of Warcraft and no one knew who they were. And they can just go play. They loved it.
Right,
It was
the anonymity is a powerful control. What about you, Steven? You in D&D, like, what do you like to play?
Oh, well, when I played
Pathfinder.
If I played Pathfinder, I mean, now I play Dragon. But before Dragon, I would probably play Flesh Warp. Because Flesh Warp is nasty, man. It's great. I love it. What?
I would. That's why.
Why? Mark, you played with me. How chaotic am I?
I mean, I don't know. Your character. I feel
he
like
gave me infamy points.
Yeah, I feel like you're actually maybe not chaotic, but you're more of like what you said before about being like lawful evil going at chaotic, because you definitely, like, when everyone was like, let's do a chaotic fun party, and you're like, I hate parties, they're the worst. So you were more like adversarial to create conflict and drama to make the show more interesting.
I'm like Derik.
in a way that was kind of lawful. So if the characters had been more on point and trying to not be chaotic, I think you would have been very chaotic.
Yes.
But since they were trying to be chaotic, you then went in the opposite direction. So it was very interesting. I can see why Flesh Warp could be a good pick for you.
Oh yeah, I would. I like. Well, it really comes to. Actually, I'll tell you what it is. I like unpredictability, because then
you would want an ancestry that, like, somehow every day you wake up and your feats got randomly selected.
Oh my God, I would love that.
A D100 table.
You would love that.
I would
list
love that.
Of possible feats for those levels.
It's a challenge, Derik. It's a challenge.
No, I mean, there's a certain amount of that.
You and I were just talking. My favorite magic is draft.
Right, exactly, draft. Well, I'll give you a great example. There was a class. There was a book that came out very late, 3rd edition. 3.5 before 4th edition. I'm sure you know it, called Book of Nine Swords, The Tome of Battle. And it was sort of a precursor to 4th edition's power ability. And there were 3 classes in it. And at this point, they were basically trying to get you used to the idea of, have your powers written on a little index card with the information about it, almost like some sort of board game tableau or collectible card game. But there was one class that was a divinely inspired, and the idea was that you would receive random insights. And so in combat, you basically took your powers and shuffled them and put them face down. And at the start of each round, you drew, the Crusader, you drew what power you had available. And as you got higher level, you could have a larger size hand. But eventually, if you didn't use your powers, you would draw a new one. You had to discard your old one. So, and then when you ran out, you took whatever was in your hand and your discard, like Dominion, and you would like shuffle it up and make a new draw pile. And so it was literally, you were like, I would love to be able to cast that heal on you, but I don't have that yet. And I don't know when I'm going to get it.
Yep. I actually.
Fun fact about the Crusader class. At one point, I ran a playtest of some classes I had written that were like balanced with Gestalt in 3.5, which means they were new classes that had their own flavor, lore, and special abilities, but they were meant to be, this is balanced with Fighter Barbarian. This is balanced with Barbarian Bard.
Super class, basically.
Yes. So I had 6 players in the playtest. 5 of them played those, and 1 of them played a slightly nerfed Crusader. And I had them give me feedback. I was like, I know these classes are more powerful than anything you've played with normally. But I want you to tell me of these classes that I wrote. I didn't tell them. They didn't know that Crusader was a real class. And so all 6 of them were like, they were like, oddly, despite the fact that they were so busted, they were all balanced except that Crusader one that was actually slightly nerfed. That one was way stronger than all of the other ones, but the other ones were all pretty on point at the same power level.
Yeah, well,
it was hilarious.
Do you remember Wild Mage? Do you remember that one? I don't know if it was...
I remember Wild Mage. I have had them in a lot of my games.
Well, I used to play one. So
there was a hilarious
yep.
There were some hilarious things that happened. Like I think at one point a wild mage tried to cast a fireball on a monster in like a blizzard, and it wound up with a 100 roll twice, and it made the monster like fall madly in love with the wild mage while a wall of force appeared blocking between them. So it was just pounding on the wall of force like, no.
See? That's what makes it so much fun. And no surprise to you, my favorite genre of games for the longest time, back when Rogue was Rogue, and there was no such things as roguelites, was Rogue, and all the Rogue type games.
Yeah, see, you know, we did a whole podcast about shenanigans and about how, like, you know, role-playing games lead to the shenanigan type moments, right? Like, so Mark's example of the chaos mage causing the monster to fall in love with him and then he's separated by a wall of force. And to be clear, like, this is the same game that also has an entire spell line dedicated to a gigantic force hand that, you know, smashes your face. And so it's always funny to me when I see people playing Pathfinder or D&D and they're taking it so seriously, and they're telling these really, like, you know, Hollywood drama stories, and I'm like, you are playing the game where people wield killer yo-yos and have gigantic force hands that slap you around.
This
you know
game
that,
is
right?
Too serious and gritty. We can't have puppets in there.
Yeah,
they don't fit with the theme at all.
Now, granted, Mark, this is there is a dissonance that occurs, because when I have when you have a spell that like makes somebody look like a clown, and when they walk around they emit strange honking noises.
Okay? Critical fail. That's permanent.
Okay.
Permanent.
It's permanent.
But you also have a spell that like causes them to collapse into like a pile of like extra ears and eyes. And then
that one's bad too.
We literally just reviewed gruesome blast or gruesome growth the other day on our spell stream, and I said, what the hell is this spell doing here? I go, it's a spell that literally is full human centipede body horror, and then everybody in an aura begins basically vomiting and throwing up because of how disturbed it was what they just saw. Whereas a level earlier, we were talking about clown curse. What is going on here? What kind of a hotel is this?
People are weird, man.
Freelancers have range. Okay?
People are weird who invent these spells.
All I'm saying is pick a tone.
I mean, you say pick a tone.
No.
Yes.
And then you go on to Nethys, and you go into the Clownish Curse, which is in the back matter of the Circus AP.
Right.
Yes.
And
which I've used many times.
Just smushed in there with like the APG, which intentionally had some of like the weird witchy spells in it. So they were not in the same book.
New traits.
The books had tones that were a little bit different. I will agree with you overall, but you did pick a rare or uncommon spell from an AP that was a circus.
Okay. Outside of gruesome growth, you also have like feather token tree, you know, or like feather token anchor. I'm gonna pull out a little feather. Oop, it turns into a boat anchor. Brr, it's like a Wile E. Coyote cartoon.
I hate to break it to you, that feather token tree is great. One of the most powerful magic items in the game by far.
Listen, if you looked at my character sheet from our recent Pathfinder games early on, what was my character sheet full of? Feather token trees, feather token swan boats. We've got those. I had a whole set of, but that's because cool. I'm leaning into the trope of D20 fantasy being silly and cartoon like.
Well, I've told the story. It depends
on what you want to do, though. Revan Master made a good point in chat. Like, Derek, do you feel that the drunken porter scene does not belong in Macbeth?
I mean, I think it's a little bit. It was played for crude laughs, and that's what it's there for.
It's used specifically to relieve tension right before the big reveal that the king is dead.
Yeah, that's like playwriting 101, by the way. That's like
sure.
Yeah,
I mean, right? You know, you need to have dips and flaws.
Yeah, exactly.
But most RPGs games aren't so tightly scripted or paced. So
sure.
Well, why didn't you read Jewel of the Indigo Isle? Because Actually, it would be interesting because it is. I've been thinking about it. It's fairly tightly paced. And there's
the PCs can wander around and do something else.
Areas. But once you're on tracks, you're on tracks.
It's like the moment you realize that if you demoralize or sicken somebody, you make it easier to make an impression on them, right? It's like you're like, wait a second.
You know what, Derik? Suspension bridge effect, right?
Okay. Explain. What do you mean?
Okay, so it's a fairly well-known psychological study that tried to determine whether or not people can really tell the difference between being attracted to someone or just like their nerves being stimulated in some way. So what they did was they had someone who was they thought was fairly attractive, try to ask a person to take a survey for them, generally of the opposite gender, and the survey would be about whatever it was. It was fake. The survey wasn't the real psychological test. And so some of them, they did it on like this little wooden bridge that was like in the woods, where it was like crossing a creek or something that was like not really anything. It just existed there. And some of them were on a suspension bridge with a huge gap where you could just plummet to your doom, like thousands of feet below. And, you could just see down. And I think it was women who gave the survey and men who were taking the survey. The men were vastly more likely to try to ask the woman out because she gave them her number to send the survey in. Yeah. Using the phone number, they asked her out if they were on the suspension bridge, compared to on like the little bridge in the woods that was not scary. And so this was an attempt to control for various factors and determine whether or not the fact that they were afraid they were stimulated from being afraid meant that they actually like mistook that for being attracted to the person who was giving them the survey.
I rescind my no,
I'm just gonna now back you up though. The vomiting, I don't even know. But with frightened,
with frightened, that's fine. But so yeah. Anyways, I don't remember how we were talking about this. But,
I have no idea. Mark, what are your favorite ancestries? We didn't get Mark's.
I thought I was gonna get out of this.
No, you weren't.
I almost dodged it. So I play the GM like almost all of the time. So I haven't really played very many ancestries. When it comes to games that I am in right now, I am playing a Samsarin in PF1 just because I had a wacky concept that you would love, Steven. You would love it. It may be your favorite character that I've ever played.
What?
It is an amnesiac psychic who she does not remember anything about her own past, but therefore, since she's a Samsarin and had many past lives, she has the memories of the past lives are stronger than usual. So I roll a D100 chart every day to determine which of my ancestors is like predominantly influencing my personality, and they have vastly different alignments and classes. The GM worked with me also to change some of my other rebirth psychic features to key off the D100 chart. So it's really hilarious. And then my other character is a human who was raised by dryads in the woods and is completely oblivious to the way that human society works, in a sense where she was like we were trying to like do a rebellion against Cheliax, and the party was like, we should set a base somewhere, and she was like, oh, that park that we were in, it has a lot of houses there, and they were like, what? No, it doesn't. So yeah, nowhere else did I see anywhere that you could live, and it's because she thought that the trees were where you live because it's your house and you go inside of them with dryads. And these other buildings that were around, like, what is that? I've never seen something like that before. That's definitely not a house, right? So that's sort of like her shtick, is that she like literally does not know what people are doing in civilization, and is like also considers low light vision to be standard vision. So she's if anyone doesn't have that, she's like, oh no, it's like, you have very poor vision like I do.
Is this an ancestry? It just sounds like a class.
No, it's
like,
a human, but I'm
no,
but like
for all that, you're like, I'm just a human.
Like Derik was talking about before, the thing that's most important about Faye is that she is she's very into the culture that she was raised in, which was in the woods by Faye.
I'm curious, what do you think about mechanics which enforce a certain style of narrative or fictional play within an ancestry?
Like, can you give an example?
Sure. Like, like I suppose, like obviously you have things like, oh, they're a bird person, so they get a talon feat. They can
sure. But do you mean something like if you had a feat that was like, yeah, if you had an ability that all dwarves had that were like, anytime a dwarf sees an orc, they must roll a will save with a DC of their level, or else they go into a rage and murder the orc or something like that.
And that's
or is that
little
too
bit
extreme?
That's a little bit extreme. I'm thinking more something like halfling luck, right? Which is a mechanic which reinforces this thing, which is more of a, halflings are lucky. That's sort of like a saying or a thing. But here is a way that we can actually make you lucky. Like, right, it's like a meta construct, right? Like, we understand that in the language of the mechanics of the game, we are just getting a chance to re-roll some things. But if you were an outside observer and you didn't see the mechanics of the game, it would be like, boy, this halfling sure does seem like right when things are about to go bad, things work out in their favor, right?
And someone who was really into the metaphysics of the game would understand that the halfling was lucky in like the magical metaphysical sense, because fortune and misfortune are like real forces,
right? But I mean, like, the halfling luck ability would work in an anti-magic field, right? I mean, it's not a actual magical ability, right?
But it's still a force of the universe that it would, but it wouldn't work with another fortune effects.
Sure.
And it would cancel other misfortune effects. It's something that someone who is very esoterically trained in occultism might be able to understand, but like your common person on the street would just be, yeah, that halfling's just really lucky.
Right. All halflings, well, at least halflings with his feet, are essentially natural to Varen. But like, like that kind of thing is very interesting, because then you could take like a trope or a trait or a stereotype that is true in a fictional sense, and you have a way to sort of mechanize it and in the form of the halfling's luck. And I always just think that those things are more interesting.
I like them when it's telling a story. I think that's much more interesting than when it's not telling a story.
And I know halfling particularly well, because that's what I'm playing right now as my cleric. But like, he's a gutsy halfling, right? And this idea that, hey, you're, when the chips are down, you keep your head up. But then the mechanic of that is a success versus emotion effects is a critical success. And I've taken a bunch of ancestry feats that further sort of push that with the basically almost not immunity, but really being very strong against frightened effects. And I like this idea that, yes, my character is very, unfazed, and he's very headstrong and he's very gutsy. But then mechanically, here are these effects that sort of reinforce that narrative or that fictional truth. And I think that is actually really, really interesting.
I think that's the best thing you can do with an ancestry feat is to help someone tell their story of their character, and to learn more about their character and where their character is from and what they're doing. And kind of the worst thing is when it's just kind of in there and you're not sure why. Where if it was just like, we didn't really do this in PF2, but in PF1, just a lot of things had like a spell resistance or some kind of bonus against spells. There was not really a good reason for it. Even like the dwarf's most powerful ability in PF1 of just getting a +2 against spells, like, yeah, it was semi-justified. Oh, they're kind of resistant against spells, but it wasn't really like a major part of the setting like it was in some editions of D&D, where they just couldn't even cast. They couldn't join certain spellcasting classes in some D&D old editions because they were very magic resistant. But that kind of got eroded because that wasn't fun to not be able to play those classes, to the point that it was just like informed, I guess they're resistant. Take this massive bonus on all saving throws against, well, anything you really care about. That's kind of like the power, but not tied into this story as well, that is like on the other side.
Yeah, definitely.
So did we learn anything today?
Well, I mean, I didn't, because it was confirmed.
Derik already knew it all.
Derek knows it all.
I didn't have the data like you had, but like I always suspected that, despite what you might see on 5e subreddits and even Pathfinder 2 subreddits, that I felt like most people were going to be humanoid or very close, to the sort of demi-humanoid leaning, whether it's half elf, half orc, tiefling, and that the races that were probably quote unquote prettier are probably more popular, that more folks want to be elves and ASMR than they want to be, or even tiefling, which is, dark and sexy, than they want to be, dwarves or flesh warp like some crazy person.
That ASMR data point really was different, but otherwise the data I had completely matched what you expected other than that. And that was the thing that was surprised me the most, was ASMR being down. I really think it's possible they were like barely released or something like that at the point in time when that data was taken. Remember, it is 5 years old.
Right.
I think it's still pretty. You don't need as someone who does a lot of statistics, you don't need a lot of a sample size to
the sample
find that
size
out.
was enormous.
Yeah, I know. If anything, it was almost too big. And
it was so big. It if when we're talking about the Paizo data, then and the analysis that I've already mentioned in other streams for Paizo, so I could say here, there was a pretty good amount of data for for Paizo or anything else. But when we're talking about, there were multiple hundreds of thousands for the D&D Beyond data, that is enormous.
So I'd be very curious, though, two things which we don't have data on. One of them we will have data on, but one is Ancestries and Starfinder, because you can play humans, but there's a lot of Ancestries in Starfinder now. It's actually almost out of control, and there's a lot of weird ones out there, and so I'd be curious to see what people play on that.
There are surely sources of data for this.
I'm sure
that we do not have them as something that we can say here.
True.
I would say that the best two sources of data that exist, both of which Paizo has access to,
sure.
are
Pathfinder Society,
the survey where
Starfinder
they
Society.
ask what ancestries are or what species are you interested in seeing more of. I think that's probably where they got the uplifted bear, since it was one of the choices that was in there. And they obviously have that data, but that is just people saying they like it, which is, as we said before on the episode, not the same as what if people actually play. The other would be organized play data, keeping in mind that some of them require achievement points or booms or stuff.
And then the other one is just ours, Jewel the Indigo Isle, because there's no humanoids. There's humanoids, but there's no humans. There's humanoids,
but there aren't humans.
Yeah, or even human-type creatures anywhere. It's not in any aspect of the... you could play one, but they're not in the adventure at all. They're just not.
The only time that we see them is when, and even this is a questionable choice that's sort of a reader view more than the actual character view. There's a certain thing that I won't tell you what it is because it's a spoiler, but that can be viewed as whatever ancestry you are. It looks like that, and it's depicted as a human, which
there's a reason.
A little weird because it matches the reader and not the character. But
correct.
It does make it easier to understand it, and that's
correct.
The only human you'll see. Period.
Yes, there's
that's
two
wild.
humanoids,
so
and the only reason they're human is because you see what you want to see, and the person who's reading this, I'm assuming, is human.
Yes, the person reading the book is a human.
So therefore, they see a human. But if your dog is reading Jewel the Indigo Isle, they might see a dog.
Looks like William Brandis has a question.
Yes.
Consumable ancestry with potion heritage.
When do we get a consumable ancestry, Mark?
That's next. That could be next year's April Fools.
We don't really want an ancestry that's literally consumable.
No, you do, because then you become. That's how you change bodies. It's like a ghost.
It's perfect for a one shot.
Literally, it's a shot. Don't drink me. I'm a shot.
It's just one.
No, think about how much fun you could have with that. You could have a consumable ancestry with scroll heritage, potion heritage,
sure,
alchemical arrow,
sure.
arrow heritage.
You could have the talisman heritage that is you were secretly very powerful, but no one, only 0.1% of all consumable ancestry are the talisman heritage. Right. You're constantly underlooked. This gives you a +4 bonus on stealth checks to sneak amongst other consumables.
So we in one of my 3 very, very long lasting Pathfinder 1 games, I was a stickler. I love rolling. They got a random item and I rolled, and it was an intelligent magical item, right? Only problem was it was a 38 charge wand. So it was an intelligent item.
Yeah.
That was part of a charged item. And so we're like, so if you use up all the charges, it's dead. Like the intelligent.
Yeah.
Don't kill it.
I like that's right up my alley. We'll probably put that into intelligent weapons. I like that idea.
Yes, it was Hurricanus, the gust of wind.
Well,
one,
in
in
Cyberpunk, that's one of the guns you get really, really early. It's a sentient gun, and every time you shoot it, it's all excited and like talks to you while you're killing people. So there's a lot you could do. I like intelligent weapons. I like intelligent weapons with limited charges. So every time you use it, it's a little closer to death.
Dun dun dun.
Hey, man.
There's another super chat for $2 from Flame Loud that is, I want to know the balancing behind summoned spells.
That's all you, Mark.
It's a pretty random.
These are all people from the Knights.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay, there you go. So
well, I mean, sort of. Whenever you're doing summoning, like philosophically, right? You have to decide what you're going to do between. Do you want to have something that is? You have a few choices. Do you want to have something that is busted? That's one of your choices. Let's assume that you don't want to do that.
Well, damn it, I'm out.
Then your other choices are: do you want to have something that is, you feel like you get to take the thing directly out of the bestiary, but is wildly uneven and potentially a huge future-proofing nightmare? Or do you want to have something that is pretty guaranteed to be a fun and reasonable statistic for what you should be able to summon at that level, but does not feel like you summoned the thing right out of the bestiary because you kind of had your own bespoke thing? Right? So like during a really early playtest that I just made myself and like ran with Linda, there wasn't even really a full bestiary. So the only option was bespoke summons.
Yeah.
And so she had an abyssal blooded sorcerer and I just and a cleric of Nethys. And so I made like weird cleric of Nethys, like half destruction, half creation things at each level that were just like, and these demons that were basically the same stats, but I put like a little bit of flavor into each one that said, okay, the sorcerer summoning are demons, the other ones summoning are Nethys' servitors. Sorry, you were saying something, Derik?
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, I think that I get where there's that probably desire to like literally be able to use the monster from the bestiary, but especially when you look at how many things and like hoops they have to jump through with the minion rules, and they can't cast spells that do XYZ alphabet. Like I think the battle form versions of polymorphing, as opposed to the old version of polymorph where you basically just became that creature, the battle form math and effects work beautifully in Pathfinder 2. The polymorph battle form spells, both for the druid and for like ones that apply to the arcane, are some of my favorite spells in the game. In terms of flavor and flavor plus effect. And I think that the summon spells would have been much cooler if they had stuck with whatever it is that you originally designed.
Well, I mean, I designed it literally for one playtest as a placeholder so that I could use it. It was never actually part of the real playtest. However, I was a proponent of that scheme, and other designers made really good points. Sure. That people want to be able to summon the thing that's from the book. That's the fantasy.
Yep.
But I maintain that the that doing it bespoke gives you a lot of value because of the fact that you know that bespoke creature is summoned by a higher level character than it. And so once you know that, you learn a lot about this creature, right? You know that it was being called and it's going to be fighting things that are much higher level than itself, right? So you probably want to go towards more of high accuracy, low damage than high damage, low accuracy, where it's just going to never hit.
Yep.
So you know for a fact how it's going to be used, and you can design it to be good.
Yes.
But to be good and meet expectations at that point, rather than just like, well, here's 200 monsters, and you find the one that's still really good at that level.
Yep.
And like, it is never an option to just make the monsters that you could summon be even higher level and also from the bestiary with fewer limitations, because then the ones that are at the top can just actually be better than like the other characters that are there or have other issues like that. The problem is because of the way that it's done, you're guaranteed to have a situation where some of the monsters are a brute, right? The brute template or class path just doesn't monster, work. Low accuracy, high damage. You just never want to summon that.
Right. I mean, because it's the idea of you're designing functionally a level 5 monster that is never going to be used when the party is level 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. They're going to be using it against level 8 or 9 monsters, and you would design that monster very, very, very differently. And to your point, you know, we've played around with the idea of like minionizing certain monsters. I said part of the problem with Pathfinder 2 monster design is that monster has to be all things to all things, right? That monster has to be both a boss if the party's lower level, or it has to be a minion or a mook if the party's higher level. And you know, so there's different design principles that you would use if it's trying to fulfill that role. And I think one of the things that you can do, even if you're using an existing monster, if you're going to be fighting it and it's party level -3 or -4 and you're using a bunch of them, change the math on it, lower its damage, increase its attack roll to like extreme for its level, just so that it can like functionally work.
You totally can.
And I highly recommend that, but I would love to have seen the summons designed in that way. I think
that's the thing too, because you might be like, well, that doesn't match the story, but except that it's been very clear, and the creative director at Pathfinder has made this clear even in PF1, the things you summon with summon spells are not like literally Bob the demon. It is a thought form idealized version of it, so it doesn't have to actually have the same stats, it's even to match the story.
Correct. It's
the
like
problem is that
Eidolon Jr.
There was and when I was proposing this, I was saying you could even say that the type of creature you're summoning in this, but like I was like, okay, fine, you have the ones that are in the bestiary. That doesn't mean we can't also have ones that are bespoke and call it summon Eidolon, and it is summoning and like an Eidolon thought form version of it or something like that. But the problem is that takes a huge amount of space to create, and if it's not your primary method of summoning, it can really confuse people and wind up being a high footprint. And especially when they're like the core rulebook already, obviously the spell chapter was a huge footprint, and there were a lot of other things that had to be sacrificed to keep the spell chapter even where it was. And in any future book than that, there's the number of pages is so high that compared to the total page count of the book, you've really sacrificed a lot. So it never really had legs. That's the kind of thing that like someone in Pathfinder Infinite or a third party could do.
Yeah.
And you could easily have them both be in the same game. And I'm sure that they wouldn't be as strong as whatever the most powerful broken thing you can find from the summon spells are. But if you don't want to go online and have someone curate you that or spend hours finding it yourself, it would still be plenty strong for something you could just summon yourself.
Yep.
Oh, I need to go because it's getting late, and we've talked about, I don't know what we talked about. It's like talked about ancestries, talked about a lot about ancestries, and we learned nothing. We learned nothing except that people like pretty things.
Well, they like pretty things. They like, I think, people both in a good and a positive. I think both in a positive way, but maybe also in a way that I don't want to say negative, because that isn't really what I'm saying. I think people use Ancestries as a way to differentiate themselves from other characters, they've created, other characters that they're playing with. I say negative only because I say, I think there's more to it than just the surface level stuff. I think if you are playing an Ancestry and you are just playing it as to be like, oh, I'm basically just a human, but I look like a gnoll, I think you're selling that short. I think leaning into what it is that makes you a gnoll, and that doesn't mean that I have brown shaggy fur and I look, cute when I'm wearing a top hat. I'm talking about like what does it mean to have been raised as a gnoll, and what does it mean to have gnoll DNA, and how does that affect your interactions and the way that you do things in both the social exploration and the combat, pillars of play. And I think if you look at it from that perspective, I think you'll come away with a more rewarding experience. And I know that we talked about this, is why I agree with what you said, Stephen. GMs, I think, do this kind of innately, or at least most do. And I think players could do it too.
Yeah. And David Green said, can you give a strange and unusual teaser? Yeah, if you subscribe to the newsletter.
The one that we did in the newsletter.
Yeah, the newsletter had an entire monster.
And there was a little journal entry from Zara, the monster mage, talking about how she found a monster called an Arantara that can detach its head and use it as a shield. And she tried to trick Kruger, the vestige hunter, into taking a vestige from it and detaching his own head to see if he could use it as a shield. He would not take that bet even for 10 platinum, and she was very sad.
Like that's like the head of Vecna.
Yes, it's exactly that. I was kind of thinking of the head of Vecna when I wrote that, Steven. So I'm glad you caught on.
Of course.
That is so
good.
Yeah,
if you want, every week we'll have Zara probably give maybe Kruger
sometimes and see it from his perspective. Yeah. The idea of this, the meta of this, is that it seems from what she's saying that Zara and Kruger have found a really weird place full of creatures that they find very unusual. And Zara always starts off by being like, what spells can you get if you kill this? Because I'm a monster ranger. That's the most important. So she's like, Tata aren't that interesting because you can only get speak with plants. But they really have some very good features I've never seen before.
So yeah, subscribe to the newsletter and just go to eldamon.com and it's the same email, same place. And every week you'll get something. Get an Eldedex entry, get a monster, you get
monster ancestry,
you get everything. You get one of all. And if you're lucky, you get Derik's pretty face looking at you, saying, "Hey,
his Kermit voice.
I'm gonna be Kermit the Frog,
Kermit the Fighter here."
You do it much better than we do.
Yes.
Well, you know.
I can't wait to watch you as a Leshy.
A man of 1,000 voices.
I know. And then tonight you're doing your session 2. Don't be sick.
Episode 2.
Don't be sick.
Tonight is episode 2.
Although you've been yawning this whole show, so I think you might fall asleep during the show.
I might take a nap.
Oh, okay.
I'm on vacation this week, so it's all good. But tonight is episode 2 of our Quest for the Frozen Flame adventure path. And then tomorrow, me, a bunch of the knights, we are heading down to Columbus, Ohio for Origins Game Fair. And we're looking forward to meeting some of our patrons there and playing some games. And we're going to try to do some podcasting on site and maybe even try to go live, maybe from a phone, but try to go live from the convention itself. So.
That'll never happen.
So Derek's 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific.
7 Eastern, 4 Pacific.
At 10 Eastern, 7 Pacific. We finally finished Book of the Dead on Arcade Mark, so we're going to do Design Diary Anatomy of an Archetype. So we're going to take archetypes apart and look at their anatomy piece by piece.
Yikes. That sounds invasive.
It is. If you were an archetype, you would be like, hey, what are you doing? I didn't sign it.
I'm sure I would.
For this.
I'm sure I would.
And Stephen, I'll hang out on the Zoom call for a few minutes if you want me.
Yes, we will talk.
Okay.
Because usually when we say goodbye, Derek's like, he hangs up. Like, Noah, he's like, man, usually people stick around, but Derek's like, I got things to do, people to see.
I've got a live stream.
Z's to catch.
Z's to catch.
I usually
Hobbits to build.
I've got a live stream that starts in 3 hours, so I got to make sure everything else is set up.
You got a live stream starts in 3 hours where he will play the Mammoth Lord himself.
That's right. That is actually true.
You are the Lord. Do they have to call you that? You should have your players call you Lord.
No, but I mean, but if they prove they're self-worthy, then perhaps one day they will wield the title of Mammoth Lord.
Dun, dun, dun.
Or maybe they'll get extra hero points.
Thanks for watching, everybody, and we will catch you next time when we are going to talk about. We don't know what we have no idea
because I come up with the idea like a day before.
Yeah, that's it. Save it for the last day.
Save it for the last second because I work best under pressure.
Yeah, I mean, we saw that with the Dungeon Ancestry.
See that my whole life. All right, bye.
Bye, everybody.